Hey guys, and welcome back to KLW Reptiles YouTube channel. I'm Kinsey, and today I want to give you guys some tips and tricks for breeding gargoyle geckos. If you guys like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. And if you guys are at all interested in our gargoyle gecko projects here at KLW Reptiles, I will leave a link to that video down in the description box. Now, the whole reason that I've decided to make this video is really for one reason in particular, but before we get into that kind of one reason and explaining that, I do want to kind of go over the breeding behavior of gargoyle geckos. So when it comes to breeding gargoyle geckos, they are a species of gecko that are rough with each other. So just keep that in mind when it comes to pairing them when you are breeding your gargoyle geckos, is to make sure that your female is receptive and that your male is not being too aggressive. It's pretty typical for females to beat up on the male if they are not receptive. And one way, basically the interaction that you'd be looking for is you put your male in there, you're kind of checking on them throughout the day, and you notice that the male is trying to breed your female. What males will do is they will actually bite along their sides, but essentially what they're doing is they're kind of testing the female, and they're saying, okay, I want to breed, are you receptive? And if the female starts to fight back, then the female's not receptive. Now, sometimes the males get the hint and sometimes they don't, so that's where we as people come in and we separate them. If I see that the female is fighting back with the male, I will actually pull that male and I will try again in a week or two. For me personally, I won't pair up geckos for an entire season. What I like to do is pair up the male in with the female, or vice versa. I kind of go back and forth on that. And I will just pair them up for about a week as long as they're getting along. And then I pull, and then I'll keep males out for a week, make sure they're still eating well, everything's good, and then I will pair up with other females. And that's kind of my rotation process during the breeding season. Something that I will also do is give the males time off. They'll do that for about a month, week on, week off kind of situation, and then I'll actually give them about a month or two off to where they'll just stay in their enclosure. They won't, be introduced with any females or females introduced with them, and that just gives them enough time to recuperate. And this is actually what I do for our crested geckos as well. But after those first initial locks and pairings and things like that, I do like to give the males some time off. And then I will actually go back and repeat that process later on in the season. And I like to do that at least 3 times for each female. Now, another thing that I did want to talk about in today's video, and actually is really the main reason that I am making today's video, is because I don't hear it talked about enough. And I think that a lot of the information that's out there is a little bit outdated in terms of when you should be pairing up your animals. Now, if we're talking about crested geckos, you want your females to be 2 years old and no smaller than 45 grams. And I would also say that they're not growing anymore, if that makes sense. Males, you can get away with, I believe, 1.5 years. I personally wait for 2 years old, and no smaller than 40 grams is the typical rule of thumb. Now with crested geckos, I won't get into it too deep because there are some, genetic factors with crested geckos where there are some smaller specimens that I have encountered for males that are just a lot smaller and they don't get past that 35 gram mark. So that's a different story, but as far as gargoyle geckos go, a lot of people will tell you that you can breed your gargoyle geckos at 2.5 years or so. And something that I have actually, over the last 6 years, I've been kind of playing around with the idea, and it's purely based on personal experience. Everything that I'm telling you guys is off of personal experience of breeding these geckos for close to 7 years. With that said, I have noticed with gargoyle geckos that you don't want to be breeding them at 2.5 years. You actually want to wait until they're closer to 4 years old. Now that's female speaking. Males, again, you can't get away with breeding them a little bit younger, just because of the nature of how the breeding process is and, what animal is taking on the largest load in terms of producing eggs and things like that. So again, this is all off of personal experience, and in my personal experience, when I first started breeding gargoyle geckos, I had a female that I paired up around the 2.5 year mark, I think is how old she was. I can't really remember. It's been a while. But I paired her up, around the recommended age at the time. And I noticed that she wasn't holding her weight. She was going through calcium crash regularly. And even in the off season after she bred, she only, she would never hold her weight. Whenever she would lay infertile eggs, it took everything out of her, and she was tiny. And so I noticed that something wasn't right there. Like, the animal wasn't holding her weight. Things really weren't working out the way that I was expecting them to, like with cresteds and things like that. And the experience level that I had didn't really make sense. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to wait to pair my gargoyle geckos until they're 4 years old. That's what I told myself. I said, I'm going to wait and I'm going to see. And so I did that this last year. This last year, basically everything that I've been breeding wasn't grown out by us. But last year in 2022, we did finally grow out some females to 4 years old, and we bred them. And the difference, I can't even explain to you the difference in these females. Typically when I breed any new female, I will breed them. So say I bred them in 2022, 2023, they'd be getting the season off because I felt like they needed it. Maybe they needed to just recover and recoup from being virgin females and that sort of thing. But these females don't even look like they've laid eggs. Like, they still regularly lay infertile eggs now. They gave me a fantastic first season. I got so many babies from them. And I strongly believe that that's because I waited until they were 4 years old. Gargoyle geckos can start laying infertile eggs. I believe the earliest that I've had mine lay infertile eggs is 2 years old. So think about it. If a gargoyle gecko technically is sexually mature and is laying infertile eggs at 2 years old, we as humans should probably be waiting a little bit longer, at least in my opinion. And from my limited experience, again, I've only been doing this for close to 7 years. And in terms of breeding animals, especially geckos, that's not very long to go through, all the motions and raising up your own young and things like that. But I've definitely noticed a difference in our females, and I would typically give those females the year off after breeding. I would always, like I said earlier, if I bred them in 2022, they'd get 2023 off because I felt like they needed it. Well, these two females in particular, I don't feel like they need it. They have held weight beautifully. They are awesome. And one other thing I do want to talk about too is how I treated them this last year. And I actually did this with both our crested geckos and our gargoyle geckos to try and mitigate any calcium crash issues. Now, some of our geckos do really like insects, but if you're a breeder, you may know that sometimes, for whatever reason, geckos will go off of crickets or insects in general. And with cresteds and gargoyles, it's really important that they get that extra insect protein, but not only the protein, but also the calcium when it comes to breeding. And one thing that I noticed is we had some females going off of those. And so what I decided and kind of implemented across all of our breedings and things like that, like I said, crested and gargoyle geckos, and I've actually seen a few other breeders recently talking about this, and I'm so happy that I did this, and the results that I got were amazing. But what I've decided to start doing, and that I will continue to do through these next few breeding seasons to compare to my past breeding seasons when I wasn't doing this, is in 2022, I decided to get I Heart Geckos liquid calcium. I got all different flavors, really didn't need to get that much, but I wanted to have all different flavors. And so I got all different flavors, and I have a dosage sheet for that liquid calcium. And what I decided to do is, no matter what, if a female lays infertile eggs or fertile eggs, especially fertile eggs though, they will be getting a dosage of liquid calcium only after they lay eggs. And since I've done that, our females, both crested and gargoyles, have bounced back incredibly. Like, they have done fantastic. I've not had any issues with calcium crash whatsoever. I believe before doing this, I had that one female for sure that went through a calcium crash, and I think 1 or 2 cresteds a season that would go through calcium crash. And since implementing this, I have had fantastic results. Now, again, this was only from 2022 is when I implemented this. And, just off of that, totally eradicating calcium crash issues has been fantastic. Not only that, females that are laying infertile eggs are bouncing back much quicker after those infertile eggs. So I'm really happy with the results so far. Now again, this was only a year's worth of experience breeding. I believe we had like 25 females produced last year, both between the crested and gargoyles. So with that said, you know, take that with what you will, but we've had fantastic experience. And we definitely want to make sure that you're not over giving them calcium, because you can run into issues with that. You just want to make sure that you're giving them the correct dosage and that sort of thing. But I've not seen any ill effects. And this is only for our breeding, you know, females that we're working with. Every once in a while, I will throw a little extra calcium in the male's dish as well, and I've noticed a tremendous increase in their behaviors too. Just to sum things up, just make sure when you're breeding gargoyles that they're not being too aggressive and that the female is actually receptive, that you're pairing up the female at a good time and also at the correct size. One thing that I hope to be able to do in the future is show you guys what calcium crash looks like, because it's not super easy to tell what's going on with the females when it's happening. And once you start to breed and sort of that sort of thing, you know, you'll be able to tell the difference between calcium crash and just a female that had a rough time laying eggs. Now again, like I said earlier, adding that extra calcium into their food, into their dish, has done amazing things for them, and I will continue to do it. Again, only off of 1 year's breeding experience, so I will keep you guys updated on how that all goes. I hope that this video was informative and was able to help you guys kind of navigate breeding gargoyle geckos. It was only really 3 tips that I have for you guys, and there's a plethora of other tips out there that I could go over, but for today, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and again, if you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in our next one. Bye!